actually is than they might have thought.
I am a violinist and a composer. My name is Jessie Montgomery. I also perform. I travel around and perform on the violin with a string quartet called the Panelists Quartet.
So my RBP Foundation started our Music by Black Composers project with the purpose of gathering as much of this music as we could, both for professional performers as well as for pedagogical purposes. My foundation has collected more than 900 works by about 350 composers from all around the world. We're very excited to have just released our timeline poster of 300 composers, our coloring book featuring the portraits and biographies of 40 composers, and our first curricular volume for violin.
Music education basically has two sort of tracks that it needs to go down. First, music needs to be a part of everyone's basic education.
So any final questions before we go?
What is an orchestra?
And then the music industry needs more participation by African American students.
Yay!
When I was a kid, the first opportunity that I saw an African American on the stage of an orchestra, it made me feel that I could do this myself too. So it was so motivational and opened the door that, oh my God, this is a possibility for me.
I want to just take a second to explain a little bit about the process of composing.
What the RBP Foundation has done is opened a door to so many kids that just don't feel classical music is theirs, right? They think it as some other.
There's been a strong presence and very, very important contributions by people of African descent as performers and composers in classical music, all the way going back to the 1700s. Unfortunately, because of historic discrimination as well as other factors, a lot of the music is out of print, or maybe it's never been published in the first place and it's in manuscript. Maybe the printed edition has errors, maybe the manuscript isn't really legible right off the music stand. So there's a lot of work to be done to get this music ready to be performed, as well as to spread awareness of what it is and where it's located. So we'll definitely have a lot of work yet ahead of us.
I think it's really important for the African American community as a musician, but also for everyone, only because it's great music, because great music is great music.
This truly represents an extraordinary contribution for our field, and I am sure that it will have a profound effect on so many young people who are studying. In fact, I really wish it would have existed when I started at just the age of 5.
Hello, and welcome to Celebrating Black Composers with UTEP Music. I'm Abeni Janae, and I'm joined here by Adria Dunn, Michael Phillips, Tawanda Chabikwa, and Cherry Duke. We're going to dive into the music. All of the performers here are UTEP musicians, students, faculty, and alumni. Between selections, we'll talk with our distinguished panel. The program has more information about our panelists and in the link in the video description. And now, let's have some music.
Scott Joplin, born in Texarkana, Texas in 1868, died in 1917. Joplin achieved fame for his ragtime compositions and was dubbed the King of Ragtime. During his brief career, he wrote over 100 original ragtime pieces, 1 ragtime ballet, and 2 operas. One of his first and most popular pieces, The Maple Leaf Rag, has been recognized as the archetypal rag. That was the UTEP Clarinet Ensemble, directed by Dr. James Logan. I'm Cherry Duke. I'm the Director of Opera at UTEP, and I'm just thrilled to be here with our 4 distinguished panelists. I'm going to ask each one of them to introduce themselves very briefly. And just to get me out of the way, I am the Director of Opera. I also teach voice at UTEP, and I sang with the American Spiritual Ensemble for several years and have a deep and abiding interest in music from a variety of cultures and spreading our repertoire to be more and more broad. Could we start with Michael Phillips?
Good evening, everybody, and I'm so glad and honored to be with you today. My name is Michael Phillips. I was born overseas, but El Paso is home. Graduated from high school in El Paso and went to UTEP for my undergrad and master's, and I got my undergrad in music education. So teaching music in El Paso, lead musicians, and just so proud to be here with you guys today, have this discussion and learn a little bit as well.
Benny?
Hello, my name is Abeni Janae. I am currently a sophomore commercial music major at UTEP. I was born and raised here in El Paso. I'm an Andrews graduate, and I'm also not only a singer, but a composer and arranger as well.
And we're going to hear some of her music tonight, both as a performer and as a composer arranger.
Yes.
Dr. Tawanda Chabikwa. Sorry about that.
Good evening. Yeah, my name is Tawanda Chabikwa, and I am relatively new faculty at UTEP, and I'm in the Department of Dance and Theater and the African American Studies program.
Thank you so much. Last but not least.
Good evening. I am Adria Dunn. I teach orchestra at America's High School in El Paso, Texas. I'm originally from New York, but came to El Paso at a very young age. I too graduated from UTEP's music department for both my bachelor's and my master's degrees. So just glad to be a part of this panel today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Would you like to share a little bit about Scott Joplin with us?
Yes, I think it's wonderful that we started with Scott Joplin. Scott Joplin is known for his ragtime, and the name ragtime possibly came from when you talk about ragged or syncopated rhythms, and that's what Scott Joplin is most known for, with his syncopated rhythms in the right hand, but his left hand tended to be more solid, so that's where we get the name ragtime. His talent was first noticed in Texarkana by a German-born musician, and from there he just encouraged him to continue on with that sort of art form in his music. In the summer of 1907, Joplin went to New York to make contacts with new publishers, and from there, his music began to continue on and spread. And at that point, he began to call himself king of ragtime writers. And oftentimes when we think of Scott Joplin, we're excited about his mba music, but all this crazy stuff that we hear in other parts of the music, whether it's on piano, we put it on violin, we just heard a clarinet group and wood bands, and we hear that is the Joplin piano, but he put a little effort in developing himself on those instruments, but mostly for piano. He is known for his fine singing voice, and many times he performed as a singer. He's also known to have had perfect pitch, which is really exciting because the different keys that he could write in, he could just imagine it in his head and put it to music. He was very proficient at music notation as well. So ragtime, which included many instruments, is not the only African American or Black music that we know of today, but we also have the spiritual.
And with that, we lead into our set of spirituals that are performed by our fellow UTEP musicians, including the UTEP Concert Chorale and some alumni and our professor here, Ms. Cherry Duke.
And we need to mention this very first spiritual, Hold On, is written by our own Janae. Enjoy these spirituals.
Abeni Janae, born in El Paso, Texas in 2001. Abeni Janae is a graduate of Andrus High School and is currently a sophomore commercial music major at the University of Texas at El Paso. With a passion for performance, composing, and producing, she wishes to be a musical jack of all trades. Her long-term goal is to be a successful musician with her own school or organization for youth that want to study and learn more about music. Hall Johnson, born in Athens, Georgia in 1888. Francis Hall Johnson was equally known for his compositions, the formation of several world-famous choirs, and a series of superb publications concerning gospel and black music. He published a vital collection entitled 30 Spirituals Arranged for Voice and Piano, in which he wrote, "This music is always serious music and should be performed seriously, in the spirit of its original conception."
Ride on, King Jesus, no man can hinder me. Ride on, King Jesus, ride on, no man can hinder me. For he is King of kings, he is Lord of lords. Jesus Christ, the first and last, no man works like him. For he is King of kings, he is Lord of lords. Jesus Christ, the first and last, no man works like him. King Jesus rides a milk-white horse, no man works like him. The river of Jordan did he cross, no man works like him. For he is King of kings, he is Lord of lords. Jesus Christ, the first and last, oh, King Jesus rides in the middle of the air. Oh, he calls the saints from everywhere. Ride on, King Jesus, no man can hinder me. Ride on, King Jesus, ride on, no man can hinder me. He is the King, he is the Lord. Yes, he is the King. just tell us no man works like him. Right on, right on, right on, Jesus.
Robert Lee Morris, born in 1941 in Chicago, Illinois. Robert Lee Morris was a choral arranger for Edward Duke Ellington and founder of the Lee Morris Chorale. Morris also composed numerous works for mixed chorus, most of which use Afrocentric folk themes. His lyric suite, a collection of spirituals in gospel style, was written in 1970 and published in 2000. All right. Spirituals. Is that what some people think of when they think of Black music? There's a whole lot more than that, we all know.
Indeed, indeed. It was interesting. As we know, when I was asked to be on this panel, I clearly stated, I'm more music adjacent than musical, and it's not really my forte. But I'm really excited to hear from Michael and Adria and Benny as well. My question that I had, because I'm treating this panel like an inroad, planting seeds and building possibilities, and it struck me the idea of beginning celebrating Black composers with ragtime and spirituals. And for myself, it raises the question of, are these the only spaces in which Blackness is allowed to be expressed, at least in the classical musical world, and of course, that idea of perhaps that's the only form of music that could be understood using what people commonly think of as musical theory, right? Which is the harmonic styles of the 18th century, so to speak. So I was curious, about the experiences of the panelists and perhaps their ideas about that. It really struck me actually when Ms. Dunn happened to mention ragtime and the ragged sound, and I thought, I have never known that, and I teach history of American social dance, and we cover ragtime, but I've never actually asked about the roots of the word rag, but that association, I think complex, among many other things. But yeah, I was just curious about this idea of Black classical music as always being seen as revolving around spirituals and or ragtime.
I believe that oftentimes when we look at the history of the United States, that's where the limit of spirituals comes in, because they did use the spirituals to meet down the river or to go over to the old church, wherever they were going to meet. They would sing Wade in the Water, for example. They would use that to meet by the river. You know, they would sing songs down by the river, or songs that they would go to meet, even to take Underground Railroad, certain songs that they would use. They would sing it so the massa would not know what they were actually talking of or where they were talking about meeting. So when you're talking about American Black music, that's when the spirituals really have a larger toll.
Mm-hmm.
I also think too, maybe it was a safe space too for Black people in the church, right? I know we were using spirituals to communicate, but it was a safe space. So we could sing and call and response and have this fellowship without the stress of the outside world, so to speak. So I think, you know, it was also a home, right? And a safe place to make music and be yourself and express yourself.
I like that. I like that. You see, and for me, I see parallels with certain elements of musical history on the African continent, right? During colonialism and things like that. But I'm also curious about this idea of, did hymns, spirituals, and Christianity essentially become a safe space, right? In which Blackness could manifest itself using Christian motifs, Christian ideas, and so forth, but interpreting them in their own way for their own experience, right? And for me, and I think I mentioned this in one of our conversations, my concern is if we think of Black music or Black composers as working predominantly in spirituals and ragtime and so forth, I could possibly argue that, well, these were the spaces that were created for Black people, you know, to be safe, because we know that you were killed or beaten for playing songs and drums and dancing in ways that did not fulfill, the Euro-American version of propriety. So I wonder, in that sense, my discomfort, as I mentioned in one of our conversations, is must Black music always be seen as emerging from the context of slavery, suffering, and so forth? Is there another way of thinking of it? Can we think beyond the Middle Passage? And even within the Middle Passage, I'm curious, were there any other modes of expression? Or is that just the limits of it,
If we go back to what I would consider the motherland, or going back to Africa, many of the Black Americans came from that area, Africa, or even Europe. And that, I believe, became a common language that they could do music together. And even if they couldn't speak the exact same tongue, they could understand the music.
And the rhythms of the motherland, as you said. What about
there was a lot, Adria. Wow, there was a lot, Matt. I appreciate that.
Great.
We should mention Tawanda is from Zimbabwe. I'm sorry, Michael. Just wanted to know.
That's a great lead.
Yeah.
Tawanda, I was just wondering if we're thinking about, Adria's talked about Black music. What would you, when you're thinking about music from Africa, Zimbabwe in particular, what are some of the first sounds and images and things that come to your mind that may be completely different from Black American music and what we consider the root of it?
Indeed. See, that's the interesting thing, there are significant differences, but also significant similarities. Hymns are a big part of my upbringing, right? For myself, I was raised Roman Catholic in Zimbabwe, and, the whole range of Christian, Protestant denominations and things of that nature. And it was just a part of how I grew up. But at the same time, there was also another type of music that was happening, and it's more popular music as well. But for me, in my experience, I would say a lot of the music kind of blended in many ways and became hybrid forms, being used to address contemporary situations as we saw them. But also there was no conflict between the Europeanist forms that I learned and the more traditional forms that I learned, and the popular forms that I learned as well. So again, lots of similarities, but also lots of differences. But I notice in the United States that a lot of Black or African American identity seems to be really tied up within a very specific and rather, in my opinion, limiting narrative that is very slavery focused. For me, again, the challenge is if we always begin from there, or rather, if we always begin from a specific concept of what that experience was, I think it limits the fullness, right, of what Blackness was, music and is, musically speaking, right? So I start getting interested when we start talking about jazz, for instance, right? And I think some of us know the battle jazz had to fight to get into music departments and into academia and so forth, right? Finally made it in more or less. But you see, the resistance to jazz, for instance, I have questions about that, right? Why was that version of Blackness not fitting into, the academic institution's conception of what music was and things of that nature? So I'm always curious about that broadness. And also, African American culture really informed and influenced a lot of global Black Africana culture in the diaspora as well. And that goes greatly beyond spirituals and ragtime, you know. The,
We're going to go back to spirituals, though, for just a moment. I think talking about trouble and talking about people perhaps being defensive or having to wade in the water is a great lead-in to our next performance by Dr. Dina K. Jones of our piano faculty at UTEP. This is Margaret Bond's Troubled Water from her Suite of Spirituals. Margaret Bonds, born in Chicago, Illinois in 1913. Composer, pianist, arranger, and teacher, Margaret Bonds was one of the first Black composers and performers to gain recognition in the United States, and is best remembered today for her popular arrangements of African American spirituals and frequent collaborations with poet Langston Hughes. Of course, you all recognize Wade in the Water in that wonderful arrangement by Margaret Bonds. Thank you, Dr. Jones. Can we talk about the elephant in the room? Non-Black
Yes.
folks singing Black music.
Where do we even begin? Where do we even begin? My immediate thought is just to ask the question. I'm curious how my fellow panelists feel about that. Also, being El Paso natives, more or less, you probably have more insight into the experience and the dynamics, considering sort of the considerably low percentage, right, of Black people in El Paso. I don't
Less
know.
than 4%?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Vocally, the voices will be different.
Mhm.
And it doesn't matter how much a Black singer tries to sound non-Black or a non-Black singer tries to sound Black. There are some differences just in our timbre when we sing.
Mhm.
But if you're looking at limiting singing Black composers' music to Black musicians, El Paso doesn't have enough people.
Indeed, indeed. What are the differences that you're describing other than timbre? What do you mean? Because this goes to my question about what does music do, right? Because for myself, I believe that music is not just a vocal experience, right? Or just an oral experience, AU. For me, it's a fully embodied experience. And
It is.
because of that, it brings with it embodied knowledges. And when we scurry across the racial divide, those experiences and embodied knowledges are utterly different or very different in ways that can be read or heard in the performance itself. But I'm not sure if I can put that into words or if it's just a theory that I'm working with. I was curious what you might think of that. I saw Mr. Phillips. You nodded your head there. What was going on?
I don't think it's a theory that you're working with. There's got to be some truth to it. I mean, I think like with trauma, we all inherit that trauma from our parents and our past and our ancestors. But I also think we inherit some of the joys of music, the joys of and what that brought to them. And it just becomes part of us, and how we express it could be different. It could be dance, it could be singing, it just could be the feeling you get when you hear something, and for some reason it just strikes a chord in you. You know, it's like a sense of smell. Every once in a while I'll get a smell
And it reminds me of my grandmother, right? And she lives in Georgia, but
Mm,
it immediately hits me. So I think it's in us. This
mm.
feeling is in us for all of us, regardless of our race or creed. I mean, when you hear something that takes you back to your ancestral heritage, I think that's something to you.
Mm, mm. You see, now I'm going to throw in a little further provocation there. And again, I'm going to play the new guy card. So, with what you said there, Mr. Phillips, is this? I'm going to put that what you said right next to an idea that I think I've heard quite often, which is that music is universal, right? No matter where you are, there's certain music that'll affect people in similar ways and so forth, right? And from my very little to none knowledge of musical theory, that idea of like music is basically three things: harmony, melody, rhythm, or something of that sort, right? That's a very specific worldview that sees it that way. But I'm wondering then, because when embodied experience and histories definitely shape and affect how we feel and experience music, would you then think that the Black experience of Black music will be very different than the white experience of Black music? Therefore, the performance of Black music by Black and non-Black people will be considerably different, you know. And
If
I'm
I
also
may,
going to, oh, go for it.
if I may interject, music is universal in that anyone can perform it, but
Mm,
it's how the performance is brought forth. Uh,
indeed.
Cherry sang what Dina played on Wade in the Water, saying, Wade in the water,
Mm,
how
mm,
she sings it. But I may sing it thinking it was our passage just to get by.
mm,
So
mm,
where one person may sing it as notes and the study of the music, another person may sing it as life.
mm. Wow. I like the sound of that. I like the sound of that.
Yeah,
Um,
there was a comedian I saw the other YouTube, and he asked a member of the audience to sing "Amazing Grace," and the gentleman sang "Amazing Grace." He had a beautiful voice, and then he says, "I want you to sing it again, and I want you to sing it knowing that your brother just got out of prison and he's been there for 25 years for a wrongly accused crime or whatever." And he
Mm,
sang "Amazing Grace" again, and it was completely different because there was that
wow.
why behind it. There was story behind it,
I'm
and
getting
so
chills with you saying that.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
Wow, it's a
you know,
totally different
it,
experience.
it,
Wow.
it completely. So that goes to your point, Adria, about the why or what's underneath that, and what experiences we've had with that music
Mm,
or that song. I think
mm,
shapes it.
wow. S- So my question then is, my question then is, what is the white experience of singing so-called Negro spirituals? Is my question. I don't know if you have something, Cherry or Benny. It's yeah, that's my question for that.
well, me personally, going back to the spiritual that I arranged,
Mm,
I have a very personal connection with it in terms of not only, inspiration, but history as well as, what we see in our current day. When I wrote that spiritual, I started writing it back in my senior year of high school, and I was inspired to make my own arrangement of it after hearing a different version of that same spiritual in a video game used for part of the plot.
oh wow.
Then I started working on it, then I put it back down, and then I picked it back up again when the unfortunate event of August 3rd happened. And, we lost a lot of lives here in El Paso. And at the time, I was very distraught, and music was my only, way to cope. So that's why I picked that piece back up again, was, you know, as a message and as a coping mechanism.
Mm,
And then I put it back down again, and then I picked it back up for the final time and of completion when after hearing about the murders of Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd. So for me, it's not only connecting the spiritual to its origins of, kind of how it was written and why, you know, uh, back then of having to just hold on just a little while longer to sing on and pray on and we'll make it through, everything will be all right. Taking that message and then internalizing it for, you know, what how I, experience life as a Black woman in America today. We still see a lot of racism and injustice, and that sense of needing to hold on just a little while longer and it will be okay. So I think about that, and obviously this was a choral arrangement, so people in the choir, they may have completely different interpretations of that, because this was part of our Sing Hope Love series, where we're talking about things or just singing songs about relating to mental health and or other injustices. So they're holding on just a little while longer. What they're holding on to and for and why make it be completely different from mine. May not be wrong, or it isn't wrong at all, as long as the message is sincere, which I feel ties into how is the message in this performance being portrayed. Is it a sincere message? Is it a sincere performance, or do they make it a caricature? Which is where I think the problem may lie in some performances. Doesn't necessarily happen often regarding spirituals, but there are occasions to where it doesn't seem like it's taken as seriously. It doesn't seem like the message is that internalized, to where, as much as we are very considerate about performing music in different languages like Italian, German, and whatnot, we are very specific to get all the details right because we don't want to do anything wrong. But I noticed that same attention is not paid nearly enough to spirituals, hence, inconsistencies, lack of, interpretation. And I know there's been some discussion to where some people may feel a bit, hesitant to perform spirituals if they are not Black. Certain specific spirituals that I know, one is like Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child. That's one that I performed. But, the message behind that spiritual, and you kind of, again, you tie that to slavery. Some, non-Black people may feel hesitant about that. It's like, I don't know. And then the other thing being not wanting to say certain words in the spirituals, how they are pronounced, like
in a dialect, you mean?
Yeah, the dialect, because a lot of those words are kind of where we start to have African American vernacular English. So then people may not want to appropriate that. But I think in that case, we just need to have more of a discussion about cultural appreciation and cultural appropriation, and really how to go about that.
One way that I approach this, especially in my voice studio, of course, we established that El Paso has not all that many Black people percentage-wise, less than 4%. And Abeni is the only Black person in my voice studio at UTEP. But I have other students who want to sing music by Black composers. So we have art songs by poets who may or may not be Black. And we try to assign the specific poetry that might be relevant only to a Black experience to a Black artist. But there's plenty of other poetry. This first song we're going to hear in the next set is set to a poem by Edna St. Vincent Millay, who is a white woman. So here's a nice set of 3 art songs, and I hope that you all enjoy these. These are our 3 UTEP voice majors. H. Leslie Adams, born in Cleveland, Ohio in 1932. Harrison Leslie Adams Jr.'s works have been performed by orchestras around the world, and Metropolitan Opera artists have performed his vocal works internationally. He is listed in New Grove Dictionary of Music and Musicians, 2nd edition, International Who's Who in Music and Musicians, Wikipedia Encyclopedia, and Who's Who in America.
For you there is no song, only the shaking of the voice that meant to sing, the sound of the strong voice breaking. is the pen, and yours broken. There are ink and tears on the page. Only the tears. Only the tears. Only the tears have spoken.
Florence Price, born in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1887. Florence Beatrice Smith Price was the first African-American female composer to have a symphonic composition performed by a major American symphony orchestra. Her music combines a rich and romantic symphonic idiom with the melodic intimacy and emotional intensity of African-American spirituals.
I stood on a hill at daybreak and watched the rising sun. I saw the night in its passing and the day that had just begun. Stood on a hill at morning tide and watched the break of day. I saw the stars in the heavens as they faded slowly away. I saw the sun in its splendor rise over the hazy mists. I felt the warmth of its shining rays as the earth it fondly kissed. I saw the sheep and the shepherd rise from a night of repose. I saw the beauties of nature and the dew shine like pearls on the rose. I saw the fields and the forest. I saw the river below. I saw the ships in the harbor and wondered whither they'd go. I saw in the distance a city where slumbered the wicked and just. Close by on the hillside a graveyard where soon must mingle their dust. I saw the church in the valley where worshipped the old and the young, and I heard the bells in its tower as a heavenly anthem they sang. I listened again for the voices that rang in praise of our Lord. The hilltops echoed their music with hosannas in sweetest
Those last two pieces were by a female composer, Florence Price. I suppose you noticed that. So I'm wondering, is there any correlation between the notable scarcity of Black composers on most concert programs and the notable scarcity of female composers on most concert programs?
Yes, is the short answer.
Okay.
I think just going back to my days at UTEP, I don't remember performing a piece, whether it was wind ensemble, orchestra, that was by a female or woman composer ever. And joke that, you know, there are few pieces that we played by Black composers, even in jazz band. They were, maybe the music was written by a Black person. Yeah, but was arranged by someone who was white, you know? And so there's that difference. And so who sets the program? Who chooses the music for people to play? That's where we need to look. And if I can just go on one more thing, you know, libraries are something I oversee in my district, and we're doing an audit, a diversity audit, and nationwide, 80% of the books that are written by white males. So that leaves very little space for everybody else. And publishers are publishing 85% of those books, right, by white males. And so we got to get to the root of the problem. As the director of opera studies, or we need to be intentional about having women composers represented in our concerts and Black composers that can compose. I mean, we just need to be intentional. And I think Benny needs to be intentional about saying, excuse me, we need to do something by so-and-so, or can we look at so-and-so, and continue to push the people who are putting things on the program to represent everybody, you know?
Yeah, I mean, exactly that, because, no, my whole thing is it's obviously a systemic issue regarding, you know, the suppression of music that we are necessarily exposed to by, you know, women composers or Black composers. It, you know, it's certainly not only in, you know, classical music. This is something where it is rare to see, you know, a lot of, like, you know, Black people in certain fields of, you know, whether it be art or different careers, because of that, you know, systemic, you know, racism. But a lot of it does come down to, you know, are people really looking for it the way that they should? Like, are they really actively trying to find more of these composers, or are they just like, oh, I mean, there's not many, which I think it's not a
Which
thing
is
that they're,
false.
yeah, like there's
False.
not a, you know, low amount of, you know, composers who are women or Black. It's the fact that they're not getting the recognition that they need and deserve. And we hear about, you know, the few, but there's several many others that, you know, and it is hard to get, you know, recognized as a composer in general, but they're out there. We're out there. So, you know, that's, it's just a lot of, you know, programs and departments really need to do their due diligence in terms of letting that be known by looking for their music and putting their music on their own programs, on their own recitals and concerts, because if no one ever sings it or performs it, then who will?
I agree. It takes a bold conductor to push the pin, to set the standard, even as one of the comments said, to make it a standard. If it means every concert that we intentionally put a minority on the program, and minority, of course, doesn't just have to be women or Black women. There are so many other minorities that we don't see on the programs. We do like to have I'm going to go really just plain all Mozart, Beethoven, Tchaikovsky concerts. We love to do those. But in the midst of a concert like that, can you add something by a Black or woman composer? I think that would be exciting, because sometimes people go to hear the major works, but if you give them a taste of something else, they might find that they like it.
Well, and a great way to achieve that might be, I'm thinking about George Bridgetower, who was a contemporary of Mozart and Beethoven, was a violinist in the courts in Europe and was apparently amazing. I mean, Beethoven begged him to play his pieces and things like that. You could, on your Beethoven program, program a piece by Bridge Tower,
Yes.
contemporaries, and of course in the 20th century, you could just go crazy with that. And I just want to take a moment to remind everyone who's watching, thank you, by the way, we're so glad you're here. The program is available for you, and it's in the description of this video. And in this program, I've listed several different places where you can find lists and lists and lists and databases and directories of Black composers. And there are similar lists for female composers, by the way. We're now in Women's History Month, so to speak. Last month was Black History Month, but there's never a wrong time to celebrate diversity on the musical stage. Yeah. Shall we move on to jazz?
Indeed.
What do you say?
Sure, indeed. I'll hold my question. I'll hold
it. Hold your question.
Absolutely.
Dr. Andy Smith is our director of percussion here at UTEP, and he has this wonderful combination of two Max Roach pieces. Max Roach was known as one of the pioneers in bebop jazz, but he was also a very important composer. And then following that, we're going to have a Benny Janae's rendition of Strange Fruit, made famous by Billie Holiday. Max Roach, born in 1924 in Newland, North Carolina. Max Roach, a pioneer of bebop jazz, famously collaborated with Clifford Brown, Sonny Rollins, and many others. He composed We Insist, Max Roach's Freedom Now Suite in 1960 to commemorate the centennial anniversary of Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. Roach is known for his revolutionary melodic and polyrhythmic style. Billie Holiday, born in 1915 in Baltimore, Maryland, died in 1959. Billie Holiday was one of the most influential jazz singers of all time. Her iconic rendition of Strange Fruit, a song about lynching of Black people, made her a target of persecution. However, it never stopped her from singing this very important song and inspiring others to keep singing as well.
Southern trees bearing strange fruit, blood on the leaves, and blood at the root, like honey swinging in the southern breeze, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees. I saw the sea of the gallant south, the bulging eyes and the twisted mouth, scent of magnolias, sweet and fresh. Then comes the smell of burning flesh. Here's a fruit for the crows to pluck, for the rain to gather, for the wind to suck, for the sun to rot, for the trees to drop. Here's a strange and bitter
Fantastic. So we find ourselves here in jazz land, and Black composers and musicians have greatly influenced at least American popular music. I don't know about the global perspective, Tawanda, but you could say that the African rhythms and African themes have found their way into just about every genre of popular music.
Yeah, I mean, for myself, it's an interesting thing. I always like to complicate and be a little nuanced about that observation.
Please.
Because it's like, yes, yes. Wow, I'm trying to hold the floodgates and the dam one sentence at a time.
You don't have to hold them.
The idea is this. For me, I only speak for Tawanda, as always. Idea is this. To me, Black music, Blackness, and Black worldviews have deeply shaped global popular culture in amazing ways. an interesting thing along with influencing popular culture and just musical creative culture in general. Blackness and black people and black creative practices have ended up being treated like a resource to be extracted, not unlike minerals are extracted from Africa. So this idea of blackness as a resource, a cultural resource for the globe, is
Mm.
beautiful and disconcerting at the same time. You know, that's just my take on that. But yeah, I mean, I know growing up in Zimbabwe, like I said, African American culture really hit Africa in amazing, important ways and shaped our own liberation struggles, right? The first song I remember my dad teaching me on the guitar was Jimi Hendrix, Hey Joe, right? And you'll also see old school pictures of my pops in bell bottoms with his afro and disco shirt in Zimbabwe, right? But it's like the attitudes, the thoughts. There's this amazing trans global blackness. There's a scholar who talks about it as stereo modernism, but how sonic cultures and sound cultures of the black world are really intermingled, and that's partly because there is a global anti-blackness. So there's an extent to which, the global black experience, without being absolutely similar, has many places where it connects and resonates. But I also just want to say, Benny, this set, and also with, Dr. Andrew Smith there, this got me good. This got me good. That was beautiful. That was beautiful.
Oh,
See?
thank you so much.
I'm curious to hear about the experience sort of not just singing Strange Fruit, but again from, Mr. Phillips and Miss Dunn, your experience of El Paso and jazz. It, I'm trying to ask that question in a better way. I guess it comes up because previously when I held my question, Miss Dunyan mentioned that it would take a bold composer or a director to like plant the little seeds of color here and there. Why would they have to be bold? Are there repercussions? Are there expectations and whatnot? I'm all about making these things explicit. So I'm
I
just
think
curious, like,
I
yeah.
think we don't see them even thinking that way. And so it's a
Mm,
matter of changing mindset. So their mind has to open and say, you know what, let me try something else. That's what brings about the boldness.
indeed, indeed. I hear you. Yeah. And I appreciate that comment there, Miss Jones. Indeed. Uh, yeah, the equality factor, right? It has to be an equal give and take. And I'd be curious how we define equality given the drastically different power dynamics, interracially speaking. And people do make great efforts to do that. And it's fascinating. It's fascinating. Again, I don't see blackness from a kind of victim culture place. I'm always just intrigued by the flows of power, and that's how that's navigated. You know, yeah.
Well, and I
Could I?
think I'm sorry, the power dynamic is at the crux of it, right? Who holds the
Mm,
power and what decisions are made and by whom and for whom? You know,
indeed.
um, we really need to look at that power dynamic, and I think Adria is also talking about that power dynamic and being able to lift that pen to do that. I mean, she may have
Mm,
the power to put something on her program, but then there's also other people who have influence over her choices, positive
mm,
or negative, right? And there may or
mm,
may not be consequences for those choices she's made. And I
yeah.
think as a Black person in El Paso, we're always cognizant of that because it's a majority Hispanic community, but the power is with white people. And then we have this small segment of Black people in El Paso. Most of them have maybe some military roots, right? And so there's they're even categorized, right? Oh,
Mm.
you must be a military brat. Oh, you must have grown up in Northeast El Paso. Oh, you must have gone to Andrews High School. Yes, all of that
I
is
am
true.
none of the above.
I love that. That's great. And that's a beautiful thing to acknowledge, right? Even as we're having this conversation, for me, like when this was happening, I thought, well, this is interesting to have in El Paso, right? It'll be different if we're doing it in Chicago or New York, you know. But I like to think wherever possible to allow Blackness to be a place where many different causes against oppression can align, and that includes Indigenous, Chicano, Latinx, and so forth. I was going to hazard like a little provocation, a mild one. Slightly, sort of thinking about that idea of the boldness that's necessary to achieve certain things. Now, again, I'm only music adjacent. My attention to music comes through the dance area of things. And there was a little, I was picking up notebooks from years ago, and there was this musicologist, I guess, called Philip A. Ewell. And it's a very brief quote, but he's talking specifically about music theory. You know, I have a bit of a question at that, but he says something about music theory can be seen as a racial ideology in which the views and ideas of white persons are held to be more significant than the views and ideas of non-whites. My question there, what I'm asking again, and this goes back to what I was saying, is music really universal? I think there are often implicit things that occur that are never stated explicitly. The racial undertones of the practices used in musical performance and pedagogy. I've seen similar things in the dance world. I've seen similar things in the art world. So I just wanted, I felt I would be holding myself back if I just didn't acknowledge that that's a possible perspective that's there that could make these things difficult. These changes we're talking about, right? When you're talking about how can we bring in more off-color composers, more women composers, and so forth, that's a great thing to think about, but without actually acknowledging the root of the problem, which may be raciological ideals, patriarchy, whatever you want to call it, right? Without beginning by looking that in the face and saying, this is where we are, I think we'll probably just flounder around, right? And keep asking, why is it so difficult to do? Why is it so difficult to do? Well, we're trying to include things in a predominantly masculinist or patriarchal / Euro-Western space. There are implications there, right? Both for academia and professional performance. Having said that, that's kind of my provocation, right? How do we build solutions around that? In my experience, most institutions and so forth aren't even willing just to acknowledge that factor, right? Because I think, especially nowadays, right, where I think a lot of people are tiptoeing around afraid of being called racist, I think there's a much healthier conversation we can have, you know, just by declassifying, letting go of the secrets, and just acknowledging that this is where we are. So it's unfair for me if I want to bring in a Benny into, you know, the music world, and I don't let her know this is the space that we're bringing you into, right? So inclusivity becomes a key word, right? Virtue signaling, without acknowledging what we are trying to include people in. And for me, that could have very harmful psychological and spiritual effects for those who go that direction as well. So I'm curious how you kind of navigate that, or how you have navigated that in all of your experiences in El Paso, knowing that that's there as well. Is it acknowledged? Is it not? And so forth. And how we
Let
can
me
then
just
build
say,
solutions from that.
it's easier to go with the status quo. And what do I mean by that? When I graduated from Coronado High School, which there were a total of 25 Blacks in the school when I graduated many years ago, total in the school. So when I graduated from there and I went to Houston, all of a sudden I see this large race of Blacks all around me, many of whom played string instruments in the orchestra. And then I was introduced by a lady named Ann Lundy to it was the African American orchestra that she had in Houston. And I began to be introduced to new Black composers. William Grant Still was one that I was just really in awe of, because I thought, wow, he wrote this multi-movement work for strings and, you know, a full orchestra, full symphony orchestra. And it's not that I'm saying status quo. It's not that people in El Paso aren't interested. Sometimes they just don't know. I hate to say this, and I'm going to say it anyway. What's Juneteenth? I didn't learn that until I went to college in Houston. What was Juneteenth? We never celebrated it in El Paso. I didn't know what it was, and I went back one summer trying to figure out why everybody was excited to be. Because it was a major celebration that was never even discussed in our area of El Paso. So I do say, again, there is a boldness that some conductors have to take, because they may not have ever been introduced to it in this area. And we, as the minority in El Paso, sometimes we do have to step out and say something different. It's very interesting when I say to people I play in the El Paso Symphony, they're like, what? Oh, you're the one. Yes, I'm the one. You know, and they don't mean it that way. I'm the one.
Adria, don't forget about Calvin.
I mean, we have 5 concerts right now.
There's two.
No, we had Nicole, but it's never more than 2 at a time. You know, I'm the one that sits almost dead in the center. But realistically, they're people don't know. Sometimes they just don't know, so they're just going with the flow.
Since we're
Can
talking
I
about
say
orchestra, that's well, okay, really quick,
Go
and
ahead.
then we've got to play the last piece. Can we get it in
I just
by
wanna-
6:30?
Just wanted to say it's really important that the El Paso, the UTEP Opera is sponsoring this today, talking about breaking the status quo. You don't associate opera and having a panel discussion about Black music. So bravo! I think that's a start, and I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Well, thank you very much. We're trying to do our part, and it does have to keep going. This is not going to solve any problems here today, as much as we might love it to be. But I digress. Dr. Andrew Hunter and the UTEP Symphonic Band, we're going full circle back to hymn song. This is Dwayne Milburn, former Lieutenant Colonel Dwayne Milburn's composition of several different hymn tunes put into a large symphonic band arrangement. It's just beautiful, and they do a terrific job. And there might be some Black players on the stage, but they're really little. You'll have to tell me if you find any. Here we go. Dwayne Milburn, born in Baltimore, Maryland in 1963. Composer and conductor Dwayne Milburn completed a 20-year career as a commissioned officer in the United States Army Music Program. During this time, he established a reputation as a noted composer, arranger, and adjudicator, receiving commissions from the University of North Texas, the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, Pacific Serenades, and the Association of Anglican Musicians. Yay! Thank you so much to all of our UTEP musicians who contributed to this performance, this virtual concert today. And thank you to all of our panelists. Now, we're going to stick around and talk for just a few more minutes, but not everybody can stay. And I just want to say some thank yous. First, big thank you to my co-producer, Benny Janae, and Brava on your performance and your composition. It's an honor. And thank you so much to Ms. Adria Dunn. I apologize. I just want to mispronounce names today. Ms. Adria Dunn, thank you so much. She is the orchestra director at Americas High School. Mr. Michael Phillips from the El Paso Independent School District, Executive Director of 21st Century Learning and Wellbeing. Thank you, sir, for being with us. Also, he plays trombone. Oh, yeah, he does. And Tawanda Chabiqua from the dance department, as well as the African American Studies department at the University of Texas at El Paso. Thank you so much for being with us. So if you have to go, it's okay, but we're going to see if there's some questions from the commentary here, or if anyone has something they feel still needs to be said. I mean, not that we're going to say all the things that need to be said, because we'd be here for 5 days.
Wow.
I just want to say again, thank you for the opportunity to be part of this today. I learned a lot, and always glad to share, but always glad to learn. And so I appreciate the opportunity to learn today and hear from others. So thank you for that.
And I do want to say thank you to all the UTEP students, faculty, Ms. Cherry, for the songs that you brought forth, Dr. Hunter. Even that last one, it had another little I'll call it a church or gospel hymn at the end of the last song. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. And so that's something that's familiar to many Blacks even here in our local area.
And I am just really happy and honored to have been invited here, because moving to El Paso during the pandemic, I don't know too many people, but this has been absolutely great. Again, just like planting seeds and getting to know people, and I'm just having fun. It's wonderful, wonderful. And it's also inspiring to see that these ideas are, percolating in El Paso and at UTEP as well. So fabulous.
Why don't we plug your show, Tawanda?
Wait, which one? What show? Oh,
well, Lysistrata, I know is one.
Yes.
Is there more than one? Tell us about Lysistrata.
Absolutely. Yeah, Lysistrata. Indeed. The dance and theater department are putting on a live show, and I believe it's going to be our first one back live during the pandemic. And we're taking so many amazing and intense protocols to ensure safety, but we're putting on a adaptation of the play Lysistrata, and it's being directed by Jay Stratton of the theater department, and I'm joining him as the movement director, and we're working with Andy Smith from the music department and some of his students, and mixing it up. So it should be happening local.
It's not just Greek drama. There's rap involved.
There's a lot of things involved. We're mixing it up, and again, it's beautiful. We're trying to kind of show the possibility of breadth in the classics. I'm also classics adjacent as well, but what's the relevance of the classics today? So we're really mixing it up, bringing in lots of different genres, cultural perspectives, and so forth. And it is a comedy as well. So it's going to be amazingly fun. Indeed.
What are the dates? Do you have the dates for the show?
I don't have them off the top of my head. I should, but I don't.
Maybe someone out there will look them up and put them in the chat for us.
Indeed.
Anyone else have some upcoming performances they'd like to plug while we look for some questions here in the Facebook feed? I'll plug a show then.
Go for it.
Opera UTEP is presenting an evening of Zarzuela on April 16th and 18th. Spanish operetta, Spanish musical theater with classical voices. We're doing the entire first act of the classic zarzuela Luisa Fernanda, and it'll be accompanied by 4 additional pieces from 4 other zarzuelas. And my students are killing it, and we've been working with New York-based vocal coach and conductor Pablo Singer for the last several weeks. And that's all going to hit the news pretty soon. And we're just very excited. And Felipa Solis is going to talk with us about Spanish culture, since her dad danced in Spain and all these things. We're so lucky to have this diversity of culture here. Yeah. So Dr. Jones, she said her son was asking if there was going to be rap tonight. Yeah. Sorry, Andrew. We didn't have any any rap this evening.
There are no rap majors at UTEP Music, is that?
Well, Ben, do you know of
I
anybody that is crazy about rap at YouTube music? Oh, and Dr.
I love
Macchione is playing a Latin American recital.
but
Yes.
I can't rap.
Excellent.
What did you say? Did you say
I,
you
I love rap music, but I can't rap, so I guess that's that question.
Yeah. And neither can I. I got you.
Mrs. Tucker, an urban opera. I will look into that. I don't know exactly what that would refer to, but I would like to find out. Thank you for that suggestion.
Indeed. I would suggest looking at that the Castle of Our Skins organization.
Absolutely. I should need to talk
Boston
to your
based.
friend. I'll bet
Indeed.
your friend could direct me. And yes, Castle of Our Skins is a wonderful organization that Tawanda introduced me to. It's in the
Boston.
program. Yeah, it's in Boston, but you can find information, the website in our program. And
Absolutely.
it's really a fascinating group, and they're doing all kinds of stuff. And Jesse Montgomery is one of the featured artists, and I know that Felipa Solis and Zul Bailey and the El Paso Pro Musica group have brought Jesse Montgomery here in the past. She's an incredible performer and composer. She's a violinist.
Mm.
Well, are there other things you want to bring up, or some provocative questions we have avoided?
I'm just going to throw this out there. Somebody actually asked me during the pandemic about having a local African American symphony here in El Paso, or, maybe we can't do that because there may not be enough musicians, but, just something that does introduce some of the music that we're just not used to hearing in this area.
Yeah. Yeah.
Regarding that, one of my main reasons of wanting to do this, program specifically is to really show other Black youth here in El Paso who may be interested in music, where it's like, hey, classical music isn't something that is only relegated to, white people. And, classical music isn't, white music, as some people may say. It's something that, even though it's not necessarily exposed to us quite often due to whatever reasons there may be, it is something that we are very capable of doing, just like anyone else. And I always think of this as a way to encourage more Black youth to get into bands, get into orchestra, get into choir, and, at least see if music is something that they want to do. I find there's never a shortage, or there's never too many of musicians in the world. And there certainly needs to be a lot more, Black musicians, I feel personally, especially regarding youth. Hence, a lot of my focus regarding advocacy here in El Paso is, geared towards the youth. Because growing up here, admittedly, I wasn't really exposed too much regarding, organizations or, music in terms of outreach. I kind of had to be able to find that through my own, and also thankfully with the help of my choir director at my high school, Mr. V, or Valenzuela. But I think to myself, if I had more of these programs or more of these, outreach things when I was in high school, I'd probably definitely get more into music a lot sooner. And I think about my other friends, I'm like, if they were just shown this, at the same time, maybe they would have also been, musicians as well, or gotten best into music. And I think a conversation that really needs to be had is, the elephant in the room regarding racism in the world of classical music. I find it to be, something that isn't often talked about a lot, even though I find it to be very prevalent, actually. You can really pinpoint a lot of things. One of the reasons why I used to be a vocal performance major, but after some soul searching and personal, reasons of not really wanting to do it anymore, I switched to commercial music. But one of the reasons was regarding the racism that is very prevalent in opera towards Black people. One thing I noticed a lot was that even though we are in the 21st century, we're in 2021 now, there is still a problem of blackface in opera. one of the popular operas that is commonly performed is Othello, and obviously the story of Othello, if anyone knows it, Othello is a black man, but there are several cases to where they have put white male singers in blackface under the guise of, oh, well, there aren't really any black tenors that can sing this role, which is just inherently false and truly a racist idea. And, you know, the fact where if blackface is a very prevalent problem in opera, then there's definitely a lot going on regarding classical music. You know, another thing that I think about is there's always been this topic. It kind of pops up every year or so regarding whether or not Beethoven is black. And I've seen that a lot of times, if you even mention that, there are some. You could go to like any of like the classical music pages on Facebook, and if you as so much mention that, you'll kind of get attacked by some other, you know, kind of white classical music elitist who will act very distraught at the mere fact of, or the mere thought of Beethoven being black. And you think about it, it's like, what would be the problem with that? What exactly would be the issue if he was black? It wouldn't change his music. It shouldn't change how people look at him, or would it, from the eyes of these people? So it's a constant conversation that really needs to be had that is not talked about nearly enough, if at all.
I want to reassure Benny and our listeners that while I'm not pretending that there aren't problems in the opera industry, of course there are, but the opera industry is paying attention. I just received my Opera America magazine, and it's all about diversity, and the cover is an illustration with a black singer, and the main article that is pointed out is Daryl Akon's article about blackness in the opera world right now, and he is the diversity officer. I'm sorry, I'm getting it exactly wrong, but he works for Long Beach Opera, and he's their diversity consultant. In fact, I think he's not a consultant. I think he's a full-time, salaried person with Long Beach Opera. And there are many, many opera companies that in the last 9 months, 6 months maybe, have hired such people for the purpose of addressing these problems, which are old and systemic, yes. But the opera industry is trying very hard to make amends and to change. Russell Thomas has recently taken a similar position with LA Opera, and most of the major companies in the United States, notably excepting the Metropolitan Opera, the biggest opera company in the United States, most of the other companies have had a Black History Month presentation where they're presenting Black artists doing wonderful concerts, and many of them are still available for people to go and watch. They're amazing. So things are changing. Things are not perfect. Things are not fixed, but people are trying. And I think they're trying in other industries too, but I know the opera industry, that's going on. So.
Yeah, on that idea, it's fascinating. I also think, we could probably acknowledge that change looks different to different people. I think opera and theater and many other organizations have basically had no choice over the last year or two than to address these things, or at least to publish things and have the right pictures and so forth. But it's a start, because prior to that, there wasn't that. And I think, with what you were talking about, Benny, very, very significant and important. My own experience with the music industry began with my collaboration with Tanyarazwa Tawengwa, who's an amazing educator, voice person, singer, healer, and so forth. And for instance, she wrote an article that's titled, quite frankly, Opera is Racist, outlining her experiences, right, and so forth as it goes. But it's interesting to understand the depth of the challenges, I guess. But as I mentioned earlier, I think it's also difficult, it appears, for people to just begin with acknowledging certain things. And that, I think, is a challenge, which is why hopefully, like today and in many other places, it's happening all over the US, I think just planting the seeds and trying to create a space for conversation is a great place to begin, just acknowledging what is. And that can be difficult. That can be difficult, understandably.
People
But
feel
I have
threatened by
hope.
acknowledging
Yeah,
what is.
I have hope, and it's just a matter of my opinion, worldviews, right? How we see and experience the world can be very, very different. And I think there are certain histories that we carry with us that prevent us from having the most wholesome or sustainable relationship to the world, if that makes sense. So many of us carry ideas that prevent us from just sitting at the table, right? Like I mentioned earlier, this last year or two, I can see people tiptoeing around, of all races, afraid of being called racist. What what does that help us when we're trying to get to some form of racial equity and things like that? But I believe in these spaces, and there are many, many ways to do it. Many, many ways to do it. And I'm really excited about the advancements that are being made, even just in today's conversation. Really exciting, really exciting. But the idea is never to stop and never to lower your eyes in the face of iniquity, racism, or injustice. It's really wonderful to just look things in the eyes and speak the truth as it is and see what happens from there. You know, the
Beautiful.
resources are there.
For me, it's a thing of, just really, I don't know, seeing my experience and time regarding music. And I feel like uh, just how I got into music in general is kind of, I would say, I guess, unique or, different. I listen to a variety of things. If you put my Spotify on shuffle, you'll get like 7 different genres within the first, couple of skips. And if you ask me, oh, what type of music would you like to do? The answer is yes, because it's a variety of things. I'm a bit indecisive, not necessarily in terms of I don't know what to do, but I want to do everything. And, talking about like spaces, I personally struggled a lot with really finding a space for me in music. And as a Black person in music, I listen to a lot of, rock and, alternative music. And right now it's a very, white dominated space. And I've heard people all the time say stuff to me like, oh, you're Black. Why are you listening to that type of music? Oh, that's not music for Black people. And it would annoy me because I'm like, if it wasn't for Black people, this type of music wouldn't be here, you know?
I
But
love what you say there, Benny. My
yeah,
thing on that is a quote I heard from one of my professors at The Ohio State University, Dr. Linda James Myers. She's one of the, well, we don't call them foremothers, do we? But she's one of the matriarchs of Black psychology in the US. But she had this quote that was quite biblical: My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And that is pretty much how I ended up being where I am. And when you really dig into the roots of punk rock, right? And you look at Jamaican immigrants in London and so forth, right? The roots of punk, they're pretty Black, right? The roots of rock, they're pretty Black and so forth. But then also noticing, not wanting to fall into that trap where culture becomes property,
yeah,
which is also dangerous, right? This idea of this is white stuff, this is Latinx stuff, this is, and it's like, oh no, no, no. I think there's let's call it a happy medium, for lack of a better way of relating to it. But
yeah,
I think the more you dig into any genre, you will find that it does not obey the rules of race or the rules of status quo. And
yeah,
that's why any creative practice to me is beautiful, because it transcends all of that.
yeah,
Notice I didn't say it becomes universal, but it does transcend, the boundaries that are created and so forth. But thank you
yeah.
for being so open. And again, really grateful that I got to meet you. And thank you, Sherry, again for pulling this all together. This has been wonderful.
It's a team effort. It's a team
Indeed.
effort. We need to end.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you again, both of you, and the 2 that had to already go because it's getting late. And we will continue the conversation. Hopefully, we'll have another concert like this. It might be next year, but by then, maybe it'll be in person. Maybe it'll be in person. So, everyone, please be well. Thank you. We'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.